Hey everyone, today I'm going to talk about good sources for information on drugs because I think there are a lot of different places where you can get a lot of information and it's not always clear which place you should trust, so I'm going to lay out a few sources that I think are good ones for various things and then talk about their various pros and cons because the truth is a lot of these are good sources, none of them are perfect, and you can't ever just trust one source, particularly for any one kind of information. You're going to have to check several sources. So, yeah. I'm only going to be talking about websites here because it just makes the most sense. Reviewing books, it's like who buys a book for drug information. If you're looking to do quick research, then the website makes the most sense. And I'm also not going to be talking about any websites that are specifically based around one drug. So no, I'm not going to be talking about Shroomery or DMT Nexus or anything. Even though I'm aware that those websites have information about other drugs on them, they're primarily based around one drug, and so I don't want to talk about that because I want this to be able to be multi-purpose sources, basically, so you can do research about anything you happen to be taking. So I suppose I'll just go straight into the different sources then. The first one is Psychonaut which this is really my personal favorite. Anytime I'm trying something new, I check on Psychonaut to see if there's information, and there basically always is. It's the most comprehensive one I've found, or at least the most comprehensive for the safety information and all that other stuff. Arrowid, which comes later, is more comprehensive for some other types of information. But so Psychonaut Wiki is a wiki, basically. So it has pages for various drugs with all the information you would have on it, or all the information you would that is known, basically. And what's good about it? The dose, it gives fairly accurate, but more importantly, precise dosing information. It is notorious for giving doses that are on the low side, just as a safety precaution, because it is often giving doses for extremely rare and hardly drugs with no history of human use, basically. So the doses are a bit low for a lot of people, but they're still good recommendations, and I recommend you stick with the Psychonaut Wiki doses until you're familiar with them, and then you can move up if you would like. They're also very good with the legal and safety information. All that stuff is very complete, and there are other places where it's sometimes lacking, as we'll get to later, so I appreciate that a lot. Again, you still shouldn't take it as your only source, but it tends to have a very up-to-date and accurate all that information. Also, I just recommend going on that page and going to the Subjective Effects Index and reading around. There's some really great stuff on there, some very interesting pages, like the page about entities, the page about scenarios and plots. It's all great. As for what's bad, so it's a wiki, right? So you're reading text that says this is a psychedelic with this chemical profile and this pharmacology, and it has this effect profile, and it just lists a bunch of things that can happen, which means you don't really get an idea of what it's actually like. So this is why you can't only go to Psychonaut Wiki. You really should go here, but you can't only go here, because to get to get an idea of what the drug is actually like, you need to read some trip reports, and that's one area where Psychonaut Wiki is really bad. They have very few trip reports. You really have to go other places for them. And this sort of ties into that point, but also you don't really get a sense of how drugs within a class are different from each other. If you go to the Psychonaut Wiki page for LSD and 2CB, for example, they're basically the same. Whereas, if you've ever taken either of those drugs or even know much about them, you know that there's quite a bit of difference between those two. So you don't really get a sense of the difference between drugs, because the difference is usually in the magnitude and the way that the effects manifest, whereas on the page it just lists the possible effects with no explanation of what their qualitative profile or anything. Okay, so that's Psychonaut Wiki. And the next one is the Drug Classroom, which is both a website and a YouTube channel. I mostly consume it through the YouTube channel, but the website I have used before and is also great. And I say they, it appears to be one guy named Seth, and he really knows his shit thoroughly. He's probably one of the best drug resources I can give you. One of the best single-person drug resources that I can name that are alive, other than like I don't know, David Nichols or Hamilton Morris or something. Although he did have Hamilton Morris on an episode of his podcast, which was very interesting. What's good about TDC? Basically everything. His videos are comprehensive and as short as they can be, and give you all the information you would need. I really can't recommend the TDC highly enough. It's great. And honestly, if Seth wasn't making it, I would try to make something like it, because it needs to exist. It's a great resource. As for what's bad, though, there are some things that are suboptimal for at least certain groups. So, for example, if you're not into chemistry and pharmacology, all of that stuff is gone over in a lot of detail in the videos. So it just sounds sort of like, what is there a science version of the word technobabble? I guess it would be that. So you kind of need to skip around a bit if you're not a chemist, or you can just watch through it. It's not that long, but just the need to filter is definitely there if you're looking for the main, like if you're looking for the safety information or what the drug is like or whatever, you need to skip around a bit. And then also the fact that it's purely educational. There's very little entertainment value. It's just sort of giving you information, which is good in a lot of ways and is totally fine for me, but it's not like thrilling material. But again, if you're not willing to watch like a 10-minute YouTube video telling you how to use a drug safely, you shouldn't be taking it anyways. So yeah, that's really a great resource. Highly recommend. Okay, and then there's the famous or infamous Erowid, which probably everyone who has ever been interested in drugs has heard of. It's a massive archive of a ridiculous amount of information related to drug use and drugs. In a lot of ways, it's great. It has the same sort of scope, or in a lot of ways, it probably has more drugs than Psychonaut Wiki does, although the information it has on each of those drugs is probably a bit more limited because it isn't wiki format. It's just like links to stuff. So it's basically a giant archive. So what's good about it is it is probably the best repository of trip reports that exists. It has literally hundreds of thousands of trip reports in there, which is a great resource. It also has tons of information. There is no fact checking or anything though, so you have to be careful. You can get a lot of good stuff there, but you can get it's more likely to be incorrect than a lot of other websites. So double check everything there. As for what's bad about Erowid, well, the first thing is that it looks like it was designed in like 2002. The website looks like garbage. But if you can look past that, which you should be able to, then that's not really a problem. It's because it's just Web 1.0 HTML text website with some pictures. The other downside I already mentioned really is a lot of information isn't sourced, and so you can't really be sure of its accuracy. So that's the other problem. But yeah, Erowid, again, one that's worth knowing about and useful, but not amazing. Okay, and then there are two forums which are worth mentioning, Blue Light and the assorted forums on Reddit. The Blue Light forum, well, I guess they both have the same upsides and downsides, really. They're good for trip reports. There are a lot of trip reports. There's a lot of good discussion of things, a lot of people's subjective experiences, but it's worth keeping in mind. It is it's just a forum. Anyone can post. There's nothing is factual. So if you're looking for any kind of actual factual information, it's not the right place to go. But they can be useful and they can be rather interesting too. I personally hang out on some of the subreddits related to drugs and r/research chemicals particularly quite a lot. So yeah, they're pretty good. The other plus side to Reddit is that there's tons of different subreddits for particular drugs and particular subcategories of things and all that. Although some of them have gotten banned, ripped to novel dissos. Okay, and then there's the final one here, which is Tripsit, which effectively I view as like a slightly inferior Psychonaut wiki with a couple extra things added on that are really good to have. And it's a website with a bunch of random stuff on it, so it's not like just a wiki or anything. It's a page with a bunch of links to other resources on it. What's good about it, so that they have a chat room that is extremely good. It's worth knowing about. Effectively, they have different rooms for different situations. So they have one for calming you down if you're having a bad time on a drug. They have one for just sort of chilling out and talking to people. I've never had to use the calm down one, but The one for just sort of chilling out and talking to people I have used quite a bit, and it's really nice. It's cool. So that's worth having. They also made this famous chart of combinations of drugs that shows how dangerous they are or effective. And that's one of the most useful single-page drug resources that exists. It's extremely good and extremely useful, so I highly recommend looking at that. They also have fact sheets, which is the part of the website that's effectively the same as PsychonautWiki, and it's good for all the same reasons, but they're slightly less good for reasons I'll get into later. Tripsit's generally really good for drug combinations in general. A lot of websites tend to be super cautious and just say, like, don't take this with anything because we don't know anything. Tripsit has actual information on what's safe and what's not, so that they tend to be good in that area, although drug combinations are usually fairly inadvisable. As for what's bad, it's the same downsides as PsychonautWiki, so you get little sense for what the drug is actually like, what it's actually like to be on it, because you're just reading a page with some facts. And then the other problem I have with it is sometimes it's much more common to run across pages that are incomplete or have, in what's in my opinion, very insufficient safety information. So, like for example, the page on DPH on Tripsit, the diphenhydramine page, just totally fails to adequately explain how dangerous that drug is. And it has a link to the deliriance page, which you'd think would adequately explain it, but then that page really doesn't either. So yeah, that's the downside. Tripsit has sometimes bad safety information, not bad, but just not there. And that's why again, as with all of these, you shouldn't take any single one as a resource that can't be false, but it's probably slightly less reliable than some of the other ones. All right, that's basically it. If I missed some big source that you use a lot, please comment it, and I maybe will add it or add and make another video talking about it. Yeah, have a nice life.